In today's episode on Adversity to Strength, I welcome back Caroline Hughes for her second appearance on the podcast. Caroline first shared her journey through a high-flying bank executive to a survivor of severe burnout, a story that resonated deeply with listeners. This time, she reflects even more openly on the toll of her addiction to success on her health and the lessons she learned in her hospitalisation, how she continues to redefine what success means today. Caroline also shares the work she put into recovering on like a daily, weekly and monthly basis over the 18 months there as well, and also the guide to others through their burnout, helping them create balance, fulfillment and resilience without sacrificing their well-being. Caroline, welcome back to the podcast. Great to have you back on as always.
I'm delighted to be here, Lee. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you again for coming on. Yeah, obviously we had a great first conversation there as well, and we both agreed that there's a lot more that you can add a bit in more detail about your burnout, because it was such a severe burnout, 18 months there as well. So maybe tell us in a little bit more detail how you went from the road recovery all the way back to where you are and what you do now. So that'd be great.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I'll do that, Liam. I think we said on the last podcast, but maybe just to kind of keep connection that, burnout wasn't in my vocabulary. I mean, even though this was the end of 2019, it was so obvious in hindsight, but hindsight, as I say, is always 2020. And so when the stop sign came that December morning, I just thought I was really tired. That's really, okay, yes, I had collapsed, and that was very significant, kind of from a personal sense of safety and wellness, as well as, okay, I was unwell. But it was initially, why am I so tired and how can I be less tired? And so the very early days, and that would have kind of spanned a Christmas period, was really, really switching off, first of all. And I mean, I was in a big job and I had responsibilities, and that's kind of easier said than done, isn't it? So firstly, I think I was so unwell, the commitment to do that was actually quite easy because I hadn't the head for it. I mean, you kind of need your full mental capacity when you're making big decisions every single day and there's people looking at you for your input and guidance. And so my first port of call was with my team to say, okay, I need you to take care of this. I need this person to take care of this program of work. And I really kind of forced me to go, okay, how have I equipped my team to step into my shoes while I am away? Because I still thought I was just going to be gone kind of initially for a month. And I had been planning to go on holidays. So as luck would have it, I had done some handover type notes so that I could cheat with, if you like. I could kind of get an initial plan in place to secure the work that needed to be done on that front. And then it was a case of really not answering the phone and really going, look, I can respond to some text to tie out loose ends, but to try to explain to someone that you're just at a level of exhaustion whereby, that stage, as the doctors were saying to me, look, you have about 13 minutes a day of energy, and that's minutes a day, minutes per day, right? So to be in that level, and people would hear it immediately in my voice, and I'd say, I don't have capacity for conversation because I'm just so tired, but I could text. And so we kind of navigated that with work in that instance with, some phone calls, some directional, and then allowing, and that was actually hard, when you allow that kind of constant email trail or somebody constant looking for your attention, that's part of life, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
When you kind of allow that pattern to wind down, that's actually quite difficult because you really don't want the world going on without you.
Yeah, of course.
We think we're very important, and we think that the things we do, only we can do, right?
Especially yourself with the job that you were doing, kind of why would you think anything else other? Because the company give you more and more more and more things to do, take care of there. Really trusted you there as well, and suddenly you got to hand that all over. How did you feel after you'd actually done it, and you're like, right, well, that's done now? I mean, was it just like checking in on emails, or every now and then, or could you focus on recovering?
I think again, because initially it was so kind of sudden and severe. One of the things that my doctor said to me, which sounds a very simple piece of advice, but actually it was really brilliant, was, look, whenever something comes into your head that you feel you must do, just make a list, add to the list. And if by the end of the day they are what you must do, then you must find a way to get that done. But if by the end of the day there are things that either can wait or that someone else can do, well, then that's the action. It's to pass it on. And that, I think that sounds just so simple, doesn't it? But when we're kind of caught up in performance
Yeah.
and we're caught up in achievement, very often our ego can kind of run the show there, isn't it? That we're the only people who can do those things because they're the things we're famous for. And so this very simple technique of going, what is the work that only I can do? And that might
Mm.
have been like make my lunch, for example. I live on
Right.
my own and only I could do that. So it's focused, it really kind of got me into let's get really focused on what's only I can do. And then what is it that needs to be done but others can do and what is it that can wait? And because initially I was signed off for 1 month and then another month and another month, gradually over time, like the work stack, if you like, was reducing because
Yeah.
other people were stepping in, the life goes on. And probably the more challenging part of that was what was I doing with all this capacity and time that I had because I was a woman who flew around the world, who worked 15-hour days, who, had a very, very full life, lots of social attaching to that also. And
Yeah.
so almost the fatigue component, which was probably my primary symptom. And because I didn't have the energy for things, there was a lot of times going, okay, so today it's Netflix. That's what it
Yeah.
is. And if I don't remember the program, I'll just watch it again tomorrow because I really hadn't a retention. You see these red lines under your episodes, that says you've watched
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
right? And I'd see these red lines and go, I don't remember the title of the show, right? Because my recall really was not very good at that time. And I was sleeping a lot, very honestly. So the need to switch off, kind of my body kind of really ran that
Yeah.
conversation more so than my mind or my adrenaline junkie, had to really kind of take a hike. Which was, I think, where that second component of burnout then begins to kick in, which is, well, why can't I do this?
Yeah.
Everyone else is able to do this. I used to be able to do this. I've been tired before. What's different about this time? When the body really, there's a great book, is it, this book, The Body Keeps the Score.
I love
Uh,
that.
and it talks about this, the body steps into the conversation, then everything else has got to listen because,
Yeah.
the reality is that all the minor signals that have been given over the years that had been ignored, the body just attunes to let's find another way to get your attention, to get your attention, to get your attention. And so you're left with this going, what have I missed physically? What are the things that I missed?
With yourself, with the level of responsibility that you had with that job, how hard was it to let go and accept that other people were doing it? You've got to take a break because that must have been quite difficult for your brain to switch off, even though your brain's telling you you've had enough, you need
Yeah.
to stop.
Yeah, it was difficultly, very much so, because a lot of my identity was also in my career. And,
Yes. Yeah.
and then, and you kind of go, well, what else am I? And I'm a single woman and I don't have children. And so other demands were different. And obviously we were talking about a COVID period there as well, kind of by February, like I came out of hospital end of February, which was the day the first COVID case was discovered in Ireland. And so I kind of remember that so vividly. It's my equivalent of the where were you when JFK got shot of our parents' generation, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So so the switching off, I think because I got such a fright, that was what took kind of primary. And I'm the type of person I kind of don't really accept sickness in my life. That's not a thing for me. So I turned
Yeah.
my attention to, well, how do I get well here? And how do I get well, not just to be back at work, but how do I get well to have the fullness of life that I really want to have? Because when you find yourself with a lot of time on your hands and a gaping hole where something very significant used to be, and in my case it was career, place, other people it could be a relationship or right. You kind of look at your life choices, and I used to say, this is not the life I ordered. I don't know if we said this did I tell you this the last day? I used to say this is not the life I
Yeah.
ordered. Of somebody who's not really able to walk very far because my energy levels were either unpredictable or simply, non-existent, who had to let go of the iPhone with the constant buzz of requirements from colleagues and friends and social. And really face into, but this is the life I ordered because every micro decision I had made along the way, of course, had culminated in this experience. And so that was probably the hardest part of it. And when you're in that, sometimes it's good to go, oh no, I'll just go back to work and I'll just do that things because that distracts us from that exploration. And several times I had to make that choice of saying, but not it kind of was I can't go back. Not that I didn't want to because I really did, and not that I didn't try ways because we really, really did. But it was kind of looking at I've been so sick. If what are
Yeah.
the chances of this happening again? And what are the things that I need to put in place for me so that back to your question, so that I get well. So the early
Yeah.
days of task lists and keeping my world very small was really helpful because you're really in that kind of survival instinct, the psychological equivalent of the 2 miles a day radius, during a lockdown, right?
Yeah.
And of course, those things were happening in parallel. And then kind of looking at and going, okay, what's the help and the support that I need to navigate this? What's
Yeah.
what's what's the thing I don't know about already that will be helpful? Because reading books, I really didn't have capacity, information
Yeah.
retention. I really didn't have
Yeah.
the attention span, even though an audiobook kind of was a bit of comfort because it's company, and I could sleep to that and
Yes.
rewind
Yeah.
whatever I missed. So, and eating, I took a choice at that time actually that I was going to really eat a very healthy diet. And for about 6 months or so, I just said, okay, no booze. And I wasn't a very big drinker anyway at that time, but felt helpful to not add, feeling a bit iffy from a hangover into the complexity of what I was dealing with. And nobody told me to do that. It was never suggested. It just kind of felt like, well, if I want to get well, can I consume food that's also nourishing me and content, information that's nourishing, and then can I work through that? I say sometimes loads of different types of therapies that I tried over that period, whether it was talk therapy or breath work or discovered the work of a lady called Brandon Bays, who does a deep kind of emotional journey work. And that's where I began to find I had some kind of a safe haven to go to for what was beginning to come up of my own inner world. All the stories from childhood, early career, adulthood, the disappointments, the not having had children, the things that just kind of come in on you once that door opens, right?
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. And so with my rest was a primary and then navigating what was a good pace at which to exercise, right? There's the physical component and that whole kind of, I could just call it the inner landscape, the psychological journey of you used to identify in one way and that's not available right now. And therefore what is? And very
Yeah.
often it's kind of, I turned up the rocks and all the worms kind of started pulling and coming out from under it.
As always, when it comes to doing that. And with the therapy,
Yeah.
did you find, especially with how intense you were towards your job, and obviously if you like single kids or whatever, and you've got that time, a lot of people will put everything into their occupation. They would do that. Did you
That's
find
right.
that there was a lot of there was things there that you would kind of, I don't know, maybe like avoided, or there was an issue and you'd kind of like focused predominantly just on your actual career and not dealt with things, or what happened when you started having the therapies? What come up?
Yeah. Well, actually, I had already been going to a therapist for a little while. My dad had died
Right.
3 or 4 years earlier, and that had hit me very, very hard. And I remember going to the dentist, believe it or not, but a year after he died, and she started her examination. Next thing is she said, just can you sit up there for a moment? And amazing dentist, forever grateful to her. She said, what's going on, Caroline? Your mouth is a mess. What is going on? You normally have perfect teeth. What is it? And I told her, and she said, I said, can I offer you something? I have the card of a lady that I recommend in these moments to clients because very often our mouth tells us exactly what's happening, not just in our language, which is, I suppose, the world that you and I live
Yeah.
in, Lee. And she was looking at it from a physiological standpoint, said, before we do the teeth, let's talk. Like, isn't that phenomenal? Like, isn't that just, I kind of get a chill when I even
Yes,
see
it is.
that.
Yeah.
So that is
Yeah.
remarkable. So I had already, a therapeutic relationship built up when this happened. which was great. I wasn't in therapy because I thought I was burning out. It was therapy because I needed somewhere to go to empty my cup in a safe way that was
Yeah,
different
yeah,
to conversations that I was having with friends or colleagues at that time. And, I think that's one of the big benefits of anything that's talk related, and I coach now and it's just kind of similar, it's a different angle on the therapeutic route, but it
yeah,
is the same principle, isn't it, of creating
yeah.
a space to have a conversation somewhere that simply you can't have anywhere else. That's kind of my very simple definition. So
Um,
there was a time where I found therapy exhausting because I didn't always have the energy for the
yeah,
exploration. And then there were other times where I found it really uh, like just enlightening, again, to have that safe space and go, this is all going to sound a bit nuts, but I'm paying you for this. And so here it is,
yeah.
right?
And often the things that sound nuts to the client, the therapist has heard a million times there, and it's like, well,
Yes,
I kind of assumed you'd say that because if you've been through this is how you're going to react, and oh,
exactly.
really,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it sounds like it's a perfect time for you to have therapy, even if it's like quite tiring there as well. Would, would you say there were certain things that come up for you in the therapy that you hadn't thought about that might have been very related to the career and leading to the burnout? Was anything like that come up?
Mm. Do you know, Lee, because it is a number of years ago, I can't remember the specifics of at that very moment. But what I can say is, I think probably there were things that I had just that were unresolved or unaddressed.
As always.
Yeah, isn't that it? And then you pick up a rock and you realized, oh no, that was an iceberg I picked up, not a rock. And
Yeah,
I think, and particularly for me at that time, like not having had children was very much kind of on my mind, and the choices, again, this kind of narrative of this is not the life I ordered. Right?
yeah,
You know,
right.
to look at that and you go, oh, and I had relationship breakups, those kind of things that would be every day. I suppose they're part of life, isn't it?
Yeah,
Breakup, grief, needs unmet, for sure. But I think kind of as my journey has gone on, like one of the things that I find myself, whether it's in a therapy or with a coach or just in any type of personal development work, because that's very much become part of my life, because I believe in the power of facing our own inner, whatever word you want to put in here, our demons or whatever it is, because I think when
yeah,
we
yeah,
we release that, we release the hold it has over us, like the amount that's available to us through our listening, through our presence is simply, much is multiplied on a level that's you can't really quantify when you start out, on the journey. And,
yeah,
I think probably for me, part of it was always a very spiritual person. But I was really in denial about that. And it didn't kind of fit the corporate narrative and how, a very heart-centered person. And I was very grateful I was head of development and I could meet people in a space of, I'm here for you. I'm not going to ask you to, make some people redundant or, cut your increase your margins or, I was never in the hard end of that type of the HR space conversation. I was in the how do we help you get the most from you and your people around you. But actually through that time, I was kind of hiding kind of my own experience of what faith meant to me, what spirituality meant for me. And I often kind of think when I look back, I kind of think it's a bit like, you're waiting for a speaker to arrive, but there's an empty seat.
yeah.
So we create our own narrative around who's sitting in the seat, and you kind of wonder, well, why do people not really know me? Well, it's because you haven't really shared something.
Yeah. And a lot of times you don't realize often how little you shared with anyone until you
Yeah,
go to therapy. And then there's so much
yeah.
come out. And the amount of times I said to clients, have you ever told anyone? No, I haven't all the time. And they just, how do you feel? Oh, I feel so much better now I've shared about it. When did you start feeling a bit better?
I would say probably from about 6 months onwards.
6 months on.
Yeah, I had, because again, energy was my barometer, right? And I remember the beginning of that summer of 2020, which was when a lot of times the lockdowns were being lifted at that time. It feels like so long ago now, but the two are so interconnected, And like I remember being a bit kind of nervous about that because suddenly there was people around and I wondered what's my capacity for being in conversation with a gang of friends or being in a coffee shop where it's noisy or because I hadn't been in that. And I kind of remember through that summer my energy I think was good enough to do an hour's walk, which was kind of my like big aim. And then once I got to an hour's walk, maybe it was psychological, maybe not, suddenly I felt, okay, I can have purpose in my day again, that if that's what I do, and if I can go for an hour's walk, can I go for an hour's walk with somebody and have conversation? Or can I drive and have a coffee with somebody for, well, couldn't stay very long at the time with the restrictions, but I just remember across that summer, I probably got up to about 50% kind of energy levels. You just never knew which part of the day or which day of the week you might have your energy on. So I had to kind of navigate because that tendency to overload the plate is very much in my default kind of behavior pattern. So this learning, I remember a gym instructor saying to me, Karen, you need to find your middle. You need to find your middle
Yeah.
gear. Because it's when you hit I had a good day today, I was out for 4 hours, and then the next day I have no energy. It's the highs,
Yeah.
it's kind of the repeat of the same pattern. And that was a really insightful comment that he made. Lit have never forgotten of this, find your middle. And I remember looking at him going, I know what that means.
Yeah, because I mean, did you at the start, did you have an idea what your limitations were at the time, or did you have to get there and you go, yeah, you know what, I think I'm at my limit now.
I think I went from, because my limit was so low, you're told like you have about 13 minutes a day of energy, when you make lunch
Yeah,
enough for dinner, because you probably don't have the energy to make your dinner, right? So the kind of the limit was imposed by my body, and kind of my journey was actually rebuilding trust almost, between my physical body and what my ego and my mind thought was possible. And I think that was probably the journey. So the limit was in the initial days was quite easy. And then I went through this period of like just being afraid. Like, what if I go out and I collapse again? What if I'm in company and I just suddenly need to get out and I don't have the energy to drive the car? It kind of had that kind of phase in the what if of things. And then there was the great, I can do these things and kind of push the limit, go too far. This is where this kind of find your middle, mantra came in for me through that gym instructor. Where I was in this peak trough. And I remember talking to an occupational psychologist at the time, and he said, this is the very reason that you are where you are. You need to let go of, I want to push it up to 4 hours today, or I want to push it up to 5 hours, by
yeah,
the end of the week. Because that kind of project mindset, management mindset, which was so helpful to me in my career, was
yeah,
actually destructive to me in my recovery. And they were kind of key. His words were, and that was about the end of May. So that was exactly 6 months into my recovery, and then 2 or 3 months later, this Karen, you have to find your middle kind of, I was, up and down and like the
yeah,
graph in terms of what is that, and trusting my body knowing better than my brain,
yeah.
right?
It reminds me when I had long COVID. I had it a
Okay.
couple of times,
Yeah.
and the first time I had it, I was still trying to work, and I remember like logging into work, and I did 45 minutes. It's not like you're not there thinking, well, I probably should give it a rest now. It's your body's literally shut down, going, that's the end of that. And it sounds
Yeah.
like that was the case for
That's
you. You couldn't push through if you wanted to. That's it.
right. I mean, I did try to, and that probably was the part that was probably more difficult than not dabbling in work in the early days, right? It was yeah, but I can always push the envelope just a little bit. I can always go, we know when 100% is, but I've got another five, and then five becomes seven, and seven becomes 10, and the kind of adrenaline hit of that. That summer probably was the real kind of almost fully loaded lessons of what is the programming that's running my life? What is the identification that I have with performance that actually is unhelpful here? And how do I create a new one, a healthier version of this? Because performance is not all the way up. Right? Performance is some days it's 110, 80, some
Yes.
days it's 71, some days it's 93, some days 40 is just all you got, right? And so the adjustment to that, and that's where, like, I did a lot of breath work during that time, and I found that really helpful to kind of build that body mind relationship, because that's really, I think, a big part of what the journey that I was on, where everything was happening kind of from the neck up, and I knew
Yeah.
better than whatever limit my body was putting on. And then my body said, well, let's just kind of change the conversation head over fist.
Yeah.
And then it was that gradual kind of return to center, which of course is in the heart. And I kind of
Yeah.
feel that's what was happening, kind of, so that about 9 months kind of into my recovery, I was at about 70, a good 70, 80% by then.
Are you?
The first 50 was probably the easiest actually in hindsight, even though it was difficult. That kind of to 50 to 70, I kind of met all the things I thought were true about me.
Yeah, yeah. I get that. But when you got to like 70, 80%, were you there thinking, surely I should be okay now? Or had you accepted it takes as long as it takes? Or were you still thinking, well, this has been going on for 6, 7, 8 months now. I've got to be ready. I've got to be fully back to normal now.
Yeah, it kind of depended on the day, to be really
Right.
honestly. I had days where I would wait, like I kind of used to wake up and do a body scan, like really simple. And then my body scan,
Yeah.
okay, like how am I now? Like right now, how much energy do I think is in my tank for today? And the days I felt 100% and I was 100%, I just went for it 100%. And then you never knew when was the moment where the meter would run out in terms of
Yeah.
energy. And if that was in the morning time, sometimes that was more challenging for me because it's all, oh no, please let there not be another day where I can't do anything other than watch Netflix. Because I would, because my desire to be out and about, to be sociable, to be interacting, to be, at that stage I was setting up my business, I was doing some courses. So I did things that really helped kind of satisfy my brain's need for stimulation. Like that's when I did my coaching qualification, kind of about starting at about month 9, 10. It would have been the October, November of that year. Actually, coming up on a year, actually. So I deliberately chose something that was online, that was recorded, that I could navigate that. So that kind of
How did you find
became,
doing that? How
I
did you
found it
find?
great, really
Yeah,
brilliant.
not overwhelming.
No, because what I found was it gave me something to make sure that I maintained enough energy to do because I was really motivated by it and I was getting a lot personally from it, as well as it was something I really wanted to do. So let's say, for example, that used to be a Tuesday evening, I think. Yeah, it was Tuesday evening. So let's say I woke up on Tuesday feeling like, oh, my energy levels are not really great today. I would go, well, the most important thing is 6 to 8:30 in the evening. That's my must do today. So what else do I have to do so that I can do that? So it's kind of
Right.
back to that very simple, the doctor said in the beginning, what are the things that only you can do? What are the things that can wait? What are the things other people could do possibly, for you? So so sometimes I find that, and I still do that, like I have very good energy almost all of the time, but in those moments where I know the tank is running low, like I just don't do things, like I don't put things on after 7 o'clock in the evening. I really try not to because I tend to be up very
Yeah.
early. And I'll just go, okay,
Yeah.
no, what's more important is what's happening kind of within my 7 to 4 p.m. And that means, therefore, if somebody's looking for me to do something or be on a program in the evening time, it's very rare that I would say yes, unless I can rearrange my day so that I can navigate that and not be burning the candle at both ends. Because it's a bit like, saying you're off sweets and then you have a bit of chocolate and then you have another bit and then you have
Yeah.
another. Like addictive patterns are addictive patterns. They just present
Yeah.
different. So that's that's something that was a kind of at a very practical level on those days of low energy. And then I discovered kind of with regards to like my inner narrative around, well, I was very much basing my day on my energy, and that meant sometimes if I had low energy, I had low mood, and if I had good energy, I had high mood. And so when I discovered, and I didn't discover this probably for until about 2 years later, this concept that actually, we can create our day. We can create our day
Yeah.
through the way we think about our day and how we show up in it, as opposed to, the feeling we wake up with that feels like that's the only way for it to go. Oh, I feel bad today, therefore it's going to be a bad day. And so that's a lot of what I've also integrated into my life, and a very mindful kind of morning practice, so that I can be in the type of presence that I want to go forward in through the day, regardless of my energy, that I can give all that's available in that moment for that period.
You know what your limitations are for the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I know kind of I know my limitations, but I think also I probably have a better sense, generally speaking, of where my priorities are and what
Yeah.
is required of me in order to meet those. So I kind of, ultimately, some people say, limitation is created. Like, we create our limits through the thinking about what it is that we have going on. But
Mm.
actually, possibility is infinite because there is an infinite amount of choice always in the world. And I probably live more in that space, Lee, well, for what it is that's important for the people I work with, for my family, for my sense of self and my purpose in the world. How do I go into my day wearing that as my cloak,
Yeah.
rather than a limit of what's my energy good for today? And I accept that that's in the early days that I had to adopt a kind of an energy monitor because it was, out the other end of the scale. And then as it came back, as my energy came back, then it's about, well, how do I want to use this energy that I have and what's the impact I want to make with it rather than just spending it.
Yeah, yeah, that. So you get to 18 months. How did you know that you had fully recovered mentally and physically after 18 months? What happened there? Yes. When you look back, as in the person you are, how different do you think you were when you had come out of 18 months of recovering compared to the person you were at the start of that? Because it sounds like you learned so much along the way about yourself and you made a lot of changes. So what's the comparisons, do you think? So yeah, often somebody's biggest adversity becomes their biggest strength, or
Yeah,
learning curve or whatever it might be there.
absolutely.
I
Yeah,
can certainly
yeah.
see it because you could have just been burnt out for years, and with burnout it can kill you. If I remember
Oh, yeah.
rightly, when you went to hospital, they said you come across as if somebody that had a stroke. From what I exactly. So I think I'm so glad we did a second episode, because when usually you have like somebody that comes on and say you've got somebody that's been through something or burnout, they will go, yeah, it took me a year to recover, and and you might just get like a brief idea of what they've done. And so like the listener will be like, okay, well, they've recovered from it, that's great. But with yourself, where you're giving it step by step, a lot of people go, well, do you know what, that makes sense, I can use that, I can use this there. So I think it's such a great episode for people to listen to there, and to your story and the way that, and you lay it out for why it took so long, why you couldn't force it through, you're unable to do that, and to accept it and then to adapt to it. So there's just so much there. So I'm so grateful for you coming on for a second episode, Caroline. Thank you so much again for your time. It's been great,
Right.
as always.